Let's go. We got CPI coming out pretty soon, so let's see how that turns out. That's coming in about, how long do we have now for that? 2 minutes to go for the CPI numbers to come in. Let's look at see how that comes in. I am going to be playing Bloomberg as soon as we get close to the CPI numbers, so you guys get your in as well. So let's also go ahead and put this link on for everyone that's joining is in. You should be getting that on Twitter as well. So let's get that. We should be on our way for bank earnings as well. JPMorgan had good numbers, so that turned out to be pretty well. Also got BlackRock that came in. Pretty much any moment now, we should be getting the numbers that come in. I think in about 45 seconds. Yeah, in about 45 seconds, we should get the number. So again, just to go over it, we're expecting CPI to come in at 2.6% year on year. We're expecting month on month CPI to be coming in at 0.3. That's actually hotter than what it was previously. Previously, we were expecting 0.1. 0.1 is now hitting on to 0.3. Core is again expected also 0.1 to now come in at 0.3. So let's see. We should be getting the numbers in 15 seconds. So as soon as I get the numbers, I will let you know, and then you can hear out the news that comes in. And we also got Neil Datta from Renmac coming in on Bloomberg. So once that comes through, let's listen to him as well. I'm going to set this up later on so everyone can hear me on the laptop, as well as we can watch the news. But for now, this is what it is. So 0.3 on CPI, it came as expected. So those numbers are coming in the way is it. And the core CPI comes in at 0.2% instead of 0.3 that was expected. And the CPI comes in at 2.7. So that is hotter than usual. It was expected to be at 2.4, which became 2.6. And now it's at 2.7. So that's bad. But Empire State Manufacturing Index, which was at negative 8.3, has come in at positive 5.5. So that's actually been, let's go see what the markets are doing right now. We have seen the index being flat at 23,008. It is picked up a bit. So it's taking in the numbers pretty well. Let's go in and listen. So you guys can then listen into the audio. Go ahead and vote as well. So you can then let me know what happens.
Your headline on the first read, the fifth consecutive month of softer than expected core CPI in America. 5 consecutive months, all the talk of higher prices just not coming through. Not yet, you might say, but it's not here this morning, not at the headline, and not in core. Core CPI, 0.2%. The expectation in our survey, the estimate 0.3, the previous month 0.1. And the equity market?
Yeah, so the estimate was 0.3 and we're now getting it at 0.2. So that's actually a good number that's there. So you are looking at markets actually pricing in pretty well. That information, NASDAQ at days high, volatility index lower by 3%. So that's come in a lot lower than what people would have expected it to be, which in a way is what's affecting the markets to head higher. So that's good. Go ahead and vote. Let's see what actually makes sense. JP Morgan had great results today, so I'm going to be going over that as well. So let's see what happens there. BlackRock had decent results. You also had results from Wells Fargo. So that was good, decent. You didn't see bad numbers coming in from there. I'm going to wait for the Renmac guy to come in and give us a brief on what he thinks. But yeah, there you go. Let's listen in.
And not noise. Well, I mean, I think, look, we're obviously tariff revenues are going up, right? And the effective tariff rate is rising. That was the case in June. And despite that, inflation missed expectations. So that means tariffs increase costs. We all know that. Who ends up bearing the cost is where the debate is. And, I think at the margin, this probably reflects more of a margin squeeze than anything else. It's not like prices for
Hi,
core
Mohammed.
goods
How's it
aren't
going?
going up. They are. But you have, I was just looking at the data. You see big increases in appliances. You see big increases in all sorts of household furnishing and supplies. But it's also important to remember that service sector inflation, service sector prices represents the lion's share of what people spend their money on, and prices in those areas continue to go down. Ultimately, it's going to come down to nominal dollars spent, right? So to the extent that people shift more of their household budgets towards goods because the prices of those things are going up, they'll have less left over to spend elsewhere, and that means that services are at risk, and that's why they'll ultimately see the prices for those things coming down. So that to me seems to be what's going on. The nominal anchor isn't changing. Tariffs are resulting in a relative price shift. That's pushing up the prices for consumer goods. That is clear. If you look at the data, that's obvious. Look at household furnishings in the latest report. But services are providing an important offset.
Neil, is that a good enough reason for two Fed governors on the FOMC later on this month to stick their hand up and say, I think we should cut rates?
I don't think they'll be as noisy about it in July, only because.
Okay. So I think we might actually see more people on the Fed coming in to say that, hey, we should be looking into cutting rates. We have two of them coming in, Christopher Waller and Michelle Bowman, but a lot of the others should also drop in. That is something that I would expect. At this moment, I don't really think it's going to be that much of an issue. So one news article for everyone that's new year, we have a change on the S&P 500. ANSYS, that is basically being brought out by another American company that's basically gotten an approval from China for purchase. So because that's happened, now you are seeing one of the companies, right? ANSYS is now taken out from the S&P 500 and the trade desk is now added on. So let me actually see what happened to ANSYS. Yeah, so that stock's flat, but you have seen the trade desk, which is basically TTD, up about 13.84% today. So that's going to make it enter a gap all the way up till 120. I'm not sure if it's going to go all the way to 120, but it does look like you could see a move higher for trade desk today at least, and maybe in the coming few months as well. If the earnings support it, there is a likelihood of the stock going towards 120, 130. So that looks like an indication that that stock could be heading higher. Let me go over some of these inflation numbers. So new vehicles have dropped negative 0.3% on the inflation. Used cars and trucks are down negative 0.7%. And CPI for all items rises 0.3% in June, and shelter is still up. So let's go see what's happening with the bond market. The 10-year bond yield should actually be lower, and at the moment it is 0.63% lower. So that is going to be having an effect on a company called Rocket. So let me go and see what's happening there on that. I had those stocks. Yeah, so the stock was actually in the negative in pre-market. Now it's in positive, but it's not really moving that much, though I do expect it to be heading higher. Anyways, NVIDIA, we got some news coming out that NVIDIA is now going to be allowed to sell in China their H20 chips. So the fact that they're going to be selling that is bullish. And the second factor is that that's got a reverse effect with Advanced Micro Devices, AMD. That stock's up about 5%. NVIDIA, last I checked, was also up about 5, is up about 4.46%. So I think the Chinese market is opening up for both these companies. Again, seems like the US government is not going to be putting in restrictions for the AI chips, and that is going to then lead to, I would say, these AI stocks heading way higher. Now you're going to see a 4.5% move on Nvidia. That's going to make it a $4.2 trillion company. So that's actually going to make things a lot more interesting. This could be a company that be on its way to a $5 trillion economy. It is $5 trillion. I mean, yeah, it's the size of an economy. I wouldn't say no, but at this moment, 5 trillion does look like it is on its way there. So that would be 25% for the stock, about $175, $180, maybe $175 on the stock. So that could make it go all the way up to a $5 trillion company. CPI, one of the things, yeah, it's close to consensus. It's not as mild as May. You have seen some bit of a tick up. So you are seeing some part of inflation coming into the economy. A lot more people would have expected it to be a lot higher, but the reason it's not coming in, I mean, a lot more people expecting it to be higher is purely because of the tariffs, right? The tariffs effect have come through and you should see a larger spike in inflation. But for some reason, that's not happened. So that's actually bullish when that doesn't happen. Core prices rose 0.23% in June. 12-month inflation was at 2.9%. Eggs were down 7.4%. What else do we have? Let's see if we can break down a bit more. It's actually a fifth straight month of core CPI reading that's lower. So I actually think that Donald Trump is going to be coming out with another tweet saying inflation is dead. Why are you not cutting rates? What is Jerome Powell doing? Why doesn't he just go in and cut rates and all that other nonsense that's currently going on between the Trump administration and Powell? I did see the Secretary Bessent audio that did come through. Let me see if I can get it actually. If I can, I will make you guys listen to it. But one of the things that Bessent was saying was that they're not looking to fire Powell at any point of time. So if that is the case, and there is no reason to fire Powell, you could be looking at necessarily, and he also did say one other thing, right? Okay, I do have that. It's about 13 minutes, but we'll play it. So I can give you my brief there about what was Secretary Bessent saying. Right, that might actually be a lot better for you guys than to understand that. Let me just go over these CPI numbers once and for all so we don't have to keep going back and forth on this. We got that. We also had CPI coming out in Canada, which no one cares about, but still it's been a little hotter than expected. Same was the case with the US CPI. Pretty much came at estimates. So the core number, the fact that it was at 0.2% was expected to be at 0.3. That's actually a good sign that that has come to fruition. That is something that I would have expected, and that's good actually, the fact that that's happened. Let me actually just go in and see if we have some more data that comes in for market right now. Okay, let's go in and actually listen to Treasury Secretary Bessent. So, yes, maybe this might be a bad idea. Maybe you guys should be able to hear me better now.
Expected inflation reads in this country. We've had 4, we might get 5 at 8:30 Eastern time. Why do you believe that's signal and not noise?
Well, I mean, there's some persistence there, Jonathan. And look, I do have access to the number the night before, but when I'm coming on TV, I don't look at it. So I don't know what the number is going to be at 8:30. And I wouldn't, I don't know whether it's going to be down, up, or flat, but I wouldn't put too much emphasis on one number. I think it's the trend. And I think one thing that Wall Street, a lot of economists, market in general got wrong early on was that tariffs were going to cause a substantial price level rise, which just hasn't happened.
And there are some people on the FOMC, the Federal Reserve, still worried about the prospect of that happening through the summer. We've all sensed the frustration from the White House across the administration with Fed Chair Jay Powell. And a lot of confusion, I think, at this point that maybe we can address in this conversation. Is firing the Federal Reserve Chair under active consideration in the White House and the Treasury in your administration?
President Trump said numerous times he's not going to fire Jay Powell.
So that's what I was telling you, that the Secretary Bessent has come out and said that he's not looking to fire Jerome Powell because the president's not looking at it. So it is pretty, I would say it's the smartest thing that can happen. Yesterday, you did get Trump coming out and saying that whenever Secretary Bessent comes in, you do see the markets go up because he speaks well. On the flip side, when you get Trump coming in, he said that he usually riles up the markets and you could see it go lower or higher. And the fact that Secretary Bessent here clearly comes in and says that, hey, we're not looking at firing Powell, but we are looking at the fact that he will be stepping down and we will be putting in someone in November instead of Powell. That itself tells me that, you know what, they're just buying their time. They don't mind if Powell resigns tomorrow. They know he's not going to resign because Powell has been clear in saying that he does not serve to the president, he serves the American people. And the Supreme Court clearly came out and said that, hey, Donald Trump, you are not going to be able to fire Jerome Powell. You don't have the authority. It's an independent organization. So he's just trying to push buttons here, trying to see if he can do that. Now, let's go back and listen to some more from Bessent.
He's working the refs. And I've said before, I'm a basketball fan. There are two schools of working the refs. There's the Bobby Knight school, and there's the Dean Smith school. President Trump seems to prefer the Bobby Knight school. And I'll tell you, I went back over the weekend and looked, and Bobby Knight won 3 NCAA championships. My hero, Dean Smith, only won 2.
The NEC director, Kevin Hassett, I'm not sure what you'd call him, but he was asked over the weekend, can the Fed chair be fired?
So Kevin Hassett, who's currently the National Economic Chair, he's currently also in contention to become the next Federal Reserve chairperson. Now, there are a few that they're looking at. Kevin Warsh is one of them. Kevin Hassett, the guy that Bessent is now going to be speaking about, is one of them. Christopher Waller, who's already on the board, is another one. And I would say that's the best bet that's there. And fourth is Kevin Warsh, a guy who's on the outside, who Trump has met a few times. I'm guessing they've interviewed him to become the next Fed chair as well, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be happening. It's quite unlikely that that would happen. What I do believe will happen is Powell will resign and he will make sure that he leaves the Federal Reserve on his last day. He will not continue being on the Fed as a governor, which opens up his seat as well as the chairmanship seat. Adriana Kugler, the Fed president, is also, I think in January, she sets aside as well. So she's going to leave and go as well. So that's the second one. So what they can do is get Christopher Waller, who's already on their side, to come in and cut rates and bring him in as the chair, and then bring in 2 more guys who they can bring in who would support Christopher Waller. Now, if that happens, you're then going to start seeing markets pricing in more cuts than what we've priced in today. And that would actually be pretty bullish, right? Let me just go ahead and see what is currently going on with the market before we go back to Bessent. Trade desk up only about, not only, but 12.79%. So that's a move. Maybe we have seen, the equity indexes, they're down about 25 from the top, but still 22,989. So nothing really fancy there. The bond yields did collapse and come back a bit. That's the move that's currently being seen. Let me actually see what's happening with the dollar index. Okay, for some reason, crypto started falling a lot. Like they hit 123K yesterday and now they're at 116,000. So Bitcoin's actually come lower. XRP's come lower. Solana used to be at 163, now down. Even Ethereum, but Bitcoin's taken the biggest hit as of now. So no clue what's going on with there. I don't really follow crypto that much, so I'm not sure about that. But let's see how this works out. Let me just go and see the dollar index. The dollar index, right? We've been talking about it on our lives pretty often. From 96.42, it has headed up all the way up to 98.1. So there is a move higher on the dollar index that you are seeing at this moment. It has been creeping up bit by bit. So it's not too much, but it has moved. Again, it's had a fall all the way from 105 down to 96, right? So that's a huge move. $2 up on the dollar index, about 1.78% in 13 trading days. So that's about 2.5 weeks, right? So it's at least changed the narrative of just collapsing. I'll give it that. AMD up about 5%, so that's worth noting. Anyways, let's go back and listen to some more of Bessent and let's see what he has to say.
Fired. He said that's a thing that's being looked into. How should we understand those comments?
Look, and I will point out, Kevin was a collegiate basketball player. And I think, as President Trump said, he's not looking to fire Chair Powell. And as I've said, I'm not going to comment on future policy or future mistakes the Fed will make. I'll only comment on past mistakes. And look, they've had some big forecasting errors, and this may be one now.
Is there a reason for not firing him? And I ask that question because the president's also said that his term is about to expire in May of next year. Is that the reason to ultimately just wait? Or is it something else? Are you convinced by the negative consequences associated with such a move?
A lot of it that they're saying, which is the negative consequences, I do agree with, because if they do fire the Fed chair, it does look like the US dollar will take a big hit, because a lot of people that bet on America bet on the fact of rule of law, one, and they bet on the fact of independent organizations actually remaining independent. If for some reason it starts looking like that's not the case, a lot of sovereign wealth funds and sovereign countries globally might sell their dollars, not knowing if the Federal Reserve, which is the last backstop, the lender of the last resort, if they are actually truly independent or no, right? So that's the question that Bloomberg's asking Treasury Secretary Bessent as to why aren't you firing him? Is it just because of the fact that in a few months you are going to be getting him out any which ways? Let's listen into what he has to say.
Look, I think an independent central bank is very important for the conduct of monetary policy, and we can see that in terms of both the financial markets, the term premium, and longer-term debt.
You said previously the interview process would begin later on in the fall. There's been plenty of speculation as to whether that process would be brought forward. Mr. Secretary, do you still, as far as you understand, believe that's when the interview process to replace the Fed chair will begin in the fall, or is a formal process already started?
Well, look, there's a formal process that's already starting. There are a lot of great candidates, and we'll see how rapidly it progresses. It's President Trump's decision, and it will move at his speed.
Do you see any merit at all in selecting maybe a candidate that's already on the committee on the FOMC versus taking a look at someone outside of the Federal Reserve?
Again, there are a lot of good candidates inside and outside the Federal Reserve, Jonathan.
Has the chairman himself, the Fed Chair Jay Powell, given you any indication whatsoever as to what he would do once his term has expired? Will he vacate his seat as the governor of the Federal Reserve?
Well, traditionally, the Fed chair also steps down as a governor, and there's been a lot of talk of a shadow Fed chair causing confusion in advance of his or her.
So the shadow Fed chair that Bessent is talking about is the fact that before he got elected as a Treasury Secretary and during his time as a Treasury Secretary, he was talking about this thing that we could just nominate someone beforehand and say that, okay, Powell's going to be resigning in 10 months from now, and he's not doing what we want him to do, but we're going to now put in somebody on the outside who is going to be the next Fed chair. So here's a shadow Fed chair, listen to him, and when he is there, he is able to get to know that the markets are then not going to be looking at what Powell is the only one saying. It's going to start looking at the shadow Fed chair that's there, because as soon as Powell leaves, this guy's going to come into his place and then come in and talk about whatever he wants to do about the cuts. The thing is, no one at this moment wants, no market participant or sovereign wealth fund or country globally wants the Federal Reserve chair to be somebody who is just agreeing to everything that Trump says, just cutting the entire reserve rates, not by 25 basis points, but by 50 basis points. And that'll actually make the market a bit more scared. Remember, uncertainty is what makes markets go down. Certainty of monetary policy is what makes markets go higher. We need to know that the Fed is independent and that the Fed will act at times when it has to. That is more important than knowing whether the Federal Reserve chair is someone who is just going to listen to Donald Trump and do exactly what Donald Trump tells him to do. That's what the markets don't like if that happens.
Nomination, and I can tell you, I think it'd be very confusing for the market for a former Fed chair to stay on also.
So that's him saying that he doesn't want Powell to basically stay on as the Federal Reserve governor, which I was talking about 10 minutes ago, that even though he leaves the chairmanship, he can still be on the Fed board. Now, I don't really think he's going to stay after his term. He's going to leave and go. Usually they don't stay because that's like going from being the prime minister of a country or the president of a country to now just being someone at the table in the cabinet. No one really does that. They just step away and go.
Mr. Treasury Secretary, I'd love to talk to you about what's going on in NVIDIA this morning. Jensen Huang, the CEO, out in a blog statement saying that the company has, quote, provided an update to customers, noting that NVIDIA is filing applications to sell the H20 GPU again. The U.S. government has assured the company that licenses will be granted, and NVIDIA hopes to start deliveries soon. Can you attest whether or not that's true or not? The United States is willing to let NVIDIA sell H20s once again in China?
Well, again, Anne-Marie, I think that'd be a judgment that the Chinese indigenous manufacturers, namely Huawei and some others, already have an equivalent chip. So if there's an equivalent chip, then the NVIDIA H20 could be sold, because I can tell you the one thing that we do not want is a digital Belt and Road springing up around the world, because other countries or China are substituting for our American chip manufacturers.
This is the same chip, though, that the Trump administration blocked with export controls in April. So why the change in policy now?
That's a good question.
Anne-Marie, you might say that that was a negotiating chip that we used in Geneva and in London.
So this was part of the trade talks when it comes to Washington and Beijing.
So Trump never actually wanted to not sell the chip to China. He just wanted the Chinese to agree to pay the 30% tariffs, and he would then sell them the chips. So he basically kept NVIDIA's chips as pretty much as a bargaining tool and a tool to just get his tariffs the way he wanted it. So again, art of a deal, right? Remember, it's working.
Yes.
Was it a quid pro quo then? As you said, it wasn't, but was it potentially to make sure that you can get the licenses when it comes to rare earths?
Yeah, I think it was all part of a mosaic. They had things we wanted, we had things they wanted, and we're in a very good place. I expect to meet my Chinese counterpart, the vice premier, in the next few weeks.
So when and where will that meeting take place?
We're still working on that. The Chinese leadership has a big conclave at the beginning of August, so we're trying to work out whether that could be in a third country before or after that conclave.
Will the administration release the framework of the Geneva and London talks?
Well, we have released some of it, and I'll tell you that now, having settled on tariffs, on the export controls, we can move on to the next stage of talks. And I think it's very important, both for the global economy, for the U.S. economy, and for the Chinese economy, for us to move on and talk about China opening its markets and the increased domestic and consumer production there.
Are you
So that's what basically they were talking about, the fact that did it make sense to actually stop the H20 chips, allow NVIDIA not to sell it, and then eventually allow NVIDIA to sell it just so that they could get the rare earth minerals from China. They could get that deal done. And once 2 and 2 is put together, they do get the tariffs. NVIDIA is happier because they go back to selling. Maybe they couldn't sell for a quarter, but the stock is back up to an all-time high. Stock's happy, stockholders happy, Trump's happy with his tariffs. Everything seems to be working out for them. Inflation's lower, and you are going to be very soon. I would believe so that you are going to be seeing Trump come out with a tweet talking about why Jerome Powell is again too late. Seems quite likely that it's going to come anytime soon. Let's actually go ahead.
Hoping to get to that next phase before August 12th, when that's currently the détente between these two economies?
Yeah, I think we're in a very good place, and I tell market participants not to worry about August 12th.
Should they worry about what's happening with Europe with respect to the 30% tariff rate? They don't seem to be worrying, but I'm just curious whether that's the final rate or whether the letter was part of a negotiation that Europe received from President Trump.
Well, Lisa, what I would say is President Trump's able to create a lot of leverage here, because he's indifferent. He's indifferent whether we take in the 30% rate or whether the Europeans come to us with a much better deal. As I've been saying for a while, that if countries or trading blocs don't come with their best deals, then the rates could boomerang back.
But that's what they've been saying since before. And the only trade deal that they technically have done and signed is with China. And that's also a framework, but the only one that they've really signed is the one with UK, the one with India, the one with Japan, the one with Vietnam. No, they've just, with Vietnam and all these other countries, they've just come out and said that, okay, here's 25% or here's 20%, this is what you pay. Story's over. And that has been some form of a trade deal, but it's not the end all be all of everything. So that doesn't seem like that's going to be the case that's going to happen. I think there's a lot more negotiation to go through. I think again in August, it's not going to go through. I think by August, you could see maybe you might see maybe Vietnam come through as a deal, but I don't think there's going to be anything more that's going to come through other than Vietnam and India with the trade deal that's there. Nothing else that's going to be happening. I'm pretty sure that they're going to eventually move on the date in August as well. And that's going to happen there. Anyways, let's go ahead and listen to what he has to say about these trade deals. Because he was asked in this question saying, after this while, he is asked this question as to, does he going to stay on? Does he want to join the Fed as the Fed chair? The last part of the interview is actually really important, and that's something that I want to talk about.
So, President Trump's leading this, and what I will tell you is that a lot of the deals, and this is where his leadership's been invaluable, a lot of the deals that I thought were excellent deals keep getting improved upon every time he takes up the maximum pressure strategy.
There is a theory in markets, and you don't even have to calm them. They're pretty calm. They're watching all of these rates, and they're not freaking out in parlance. On Wall Street, they're taking this in stride. We're close to all-time highs, if not at all-time highs. Do you see this as giving a green light to President Trump, to keep going, to take hardline approaches, and to keep trying to get better and better deals?
And this is exactly what I've been saying, right? So everyone that's new here, you guys should actually subscribe and come in for these lives, because this is what I've been saying, that all of these are just scenarios that they're playing out, because this is not something that's going to turn around and become a trade deal. These are all just frameworks. We're making deals in order to make deals some other day. It's not really happening today.
Look, I think this narrative of this obsessive focus on the market isn't right. President Trump views this as a generational opportunity to reset trade in a fair and sound manner for the American people. So the idea that some market ups or downs are going to be the deciding factor here, what we are concerned about, and President Trump is laser focused on, is getting the best deals, because we were not having fair trade, and now we're seeing, with these countries coming to the table, the quality of the deals gets better and better. So we're not going to rush just because of some market deadline. Now, I think what the market's seeing is market's willing to look forward 3, 6, 12 months, and this is going to be good for the U.S., it's going to be good for the global economy.
If you do get some sort of signal from the market, though, that this isn't going to be good for the U.S. economy, is there a trigger point? Is there sort of a sense at which it acts as a gut check and sort of pulls back some of the negotiating tactics?
Look, I think that the market understands what we're doing. Sometimes individual market people don't. Sometimes the television personalities don't. But good thing about President Trump is he always tells you what he wants, and what he wants is fair trade here.
I won't take that as a slight on me and my colleagues around the table, Mr. Treasury Secretary, but you did tell me on April 2nd, on Liberation Day, that this was the ceiling when it comes.
So what she's going to ask him now is the main question, saying, if you think about it, he was asked about this question saying the tariff rates that are currently there is ceiling that's being put. That means that's the maximum rates that are there. It's not going to go higher from there. Now that you see it actually happening, some of those rates that are being put on these countries from August 1st are pretty much the same as what the reciprocal rates were or the tariff rates were. And to a large extent, they're not actually being a ceiling. They are increasing. To some places, look at the trans-shipping goods that come out of Vietnam, 40% taxes on those. So it's not all smooth sailing for all these countries. Let me just go see if we have some more news for today. Trump threatens new tariffs on Russia. That was about 100% tariff that they were expecting. AWS is announcing an additional $100 million investment in an Amazon AWS generative AI innovation center. Okay, so JPMorgan did come out and say, this is Diamond, CEO Diamond said about potentially charging fintechs for customer data. He says fintechs should be responsible. So that's actually a bad sign for most of the fintechs, but I think they'll eventually take it in the stride. They will just charge very little or something like that. Remember, they don't want to kill the whole business by not getting through with them, right? Eventually, that's something that these guys also want. Let's see if we have some more data and then we'll go back to those, right? So JP Morgan's results that came out, revenue came in at 45.6 billion. It was estimated at 43.9. EPS came in at almost $5. It was expected at $4.50. Second dividend increase in 2025, $7 billion in stock buybacks for JP Morgan. 7 billion. Biggest bank, maybe even in the world, excluding the Chinese banks. But the earnings are shrinking. They are, remember, Wall Street had lowered the bar and JP Morgan stepped over it. So we have seen some amount of numbers come lower. Year over year, there has been a decline. Let me be honest, EPS has fallen 28% year over year. Revenues down 12% year over year, right? So CEO Diamond says significant risks persist, including from tariffs and trade. So credit card delinquencies, right? If you actually go in and see that data, it was at 2.06 last year, same time, second quarter 2025. Now, 2.08, and it's now come in at 2.06. So credit card delinquencies have fallen, which actually looks pretty good if that's the case. Because remember, if credit card delinquencies are falling, that means more people are able to make their payments of credit card payments that they have, all of their loans that they have. A lot of them also do not have to deal with any amount of issues when it comes to late payments, delayed payments, interest charged on those payments. So that's good for a bank and that's good for the consumer. When I look at it as in a holistic way, it does look better that way. I'm just trying to see if we have some more news on this JP Morgan stuff. Otherwise, we will go back to listening to Secretary Bessent. President Trump supposed to be releasing an AI action plan in his speech on July 23rd. So that's a week from now is when we're going to be seeing that happen. So markets at this moment are still near the day's high. We are just 10 points away from hitting a new high all over again, 23,030. My bet is you can still see another 3.5% move before we see any form of a pullback on the market. Remember, strength begets strength. The stronger the bull market, the more strength comes in, the more FOMO comes in for players, and that's how it keeps rolling up. I'm just trying to see if we have any breakouts in place today other than the trade desk, which is up about 13.92%. So that makes it $85.93. We still have about 24 minutes for market to open. So let's go back and finish on this video. Let's see what Treasury Bessent has to say. In the end of the video, he was asked about this thing as to whether he will be the Treasury Secretary Chief as well as the Federal Reserve Chief. Listen in for his answers and let's see.
Comes to those rates, but since then, we have actually had some tariff rates the president announced in letters higher than those rates he announced on that big chart on April 2nd. So is there no longer a ceiling when it comes to tariff rates when you are dealing with trading partners?
I think that I said if they come and they negotiate in good faith, then those are ceilings. And some of the talks got off to very slow starts.
So who's negotiating in good faith at this moment and who's not?
Again, I congratulated the UK the other day, as I told many of our trading partners, and Anne-Marie, I may have said on that day or a few days after April 2nd, I'd advise countries to move quickly because with President Trump, the first deals are usually the best deals. And the UK came in early, they got a great deal, and everybody else is kind of dragging right now.
Well, when it comes to Japan, you're headed there at the end of this week. Do you expect to come back with a deal?
I'm going to Japan to represent the United States government and the American people at the International Expo, which we used to know as the World's Fair. So this coming Saturday is going to be America's Day, and I'll be taking a delegation, includes the Labor Secretary, Deputy Secretary of State will be representing the U.S. So this is a celebration of the U.S. more than trade talks.
So he is going to Japan to speak. Most likely what it looks like is you are going to get a bilateral meeting out there at the back ends of the expo in Osaka. You are going to be getting the Japanese trade minister speaking with Besant and likely reducing their tariff rates. Now that he's put these tariff rates so high on all these countries, my view is he's going to come in and say, okay, you know what? Let's drop it down for one country. Let's see if the other countries come in, agree to what we're saying. If they do agree, let's reduce theirs as well. Eventually by August, we'll get a few more trade deals. Any good news then becomes something that the market starts latching onto and heads higher. Because the market has stopped giving a shit about what's going to be happening about Trump's rates. What is it going to be heading higher? Is it going to be heading lower? No. The market knows that all of these are just art of a deal and it's just going to go through that way. That's the reason why we're still higher today, right? Even after all of these tariff rates that have been put on all these countries in the past week, the market's pretty much like, yeah, okay, we'll just move on. We'll go ahead with it. It doesn't really matter to them.
So, Secretary, before you go, just a final question. I'm embarrassed to say that my knowledge of college basketball is nothing like yours, but I can tell you back in the 90s in English football, there used to be a concept of player managers. There used to be certain managers of football teams that also put themselves on the field and they played too. Effectively, they had two jobs. And I'm wondering from your perspective whether that's something you'd be interested in. We've seen that throughout the administration. Is that something you think that you could pursue, both the Treasury Secretary and the Fed chair?
Look, I think I have the best job in town. I will do what President Trump wants. We got a lot of great Fed candidates, and I'm confident it's going to be a robust process, Jonathan.
Has he asked you?
He's just being asked
you?
Whether President Trump has asked Scott Bessent in order to become the Fed chair.
Are you part of the process?
I am part of the decision-making process, but again, it's the final decision is going to be President Trump's.
So that's the thing, right? He comes out and says that he's part of the decision-making process. There's no way that it's going to be a scenario where Scott Bessent is going to become the Federal Reserve chair. He's not leaving his Treasury Secretary job to become the Federal Reserve chair. It just doesn't make sense, right? It's just stupid to start thinking about that in those ways. Anyways, so we have seen the market actually being closer to day's high. Stocks look like they're flat at this moment, up about 0.73%. They have, by flat, I mean they're not making a new high as to what they made like 15 minutes ago. That's a bull market for you. 23,022, so we're up about 167 on the NASDAQ. The bond yields are a bit lower, not that much. The dollar index is again in the green for today, so that's actually doing well. Anyways, do we have anything more? Crypto's actually fallen, now trying to recover a bit. It had dropped all the way down to 116, 117,000 at about 118 now. Quite possible if you need to see all-time highs on stocks to continue, you should also see that continue on cryptos. And they most likely should continue doing well. Not sure how that plays out. Let me see if some of these stocks are there. AMD up about 5%. A lot of these semiconductor ones, especially after Nvidia came in to do some of its selling in China, which is now being allowed by the administration, it does look like that's something that's going to play out. Intel up about 1. We have Netflix's earnings coming out pretty soon, so we should be keeping a watch on that. That's coming, I think, on Thursday after market. So that's up. Nvidia's up about 4.7, a new all-time high for Nvidia again. That's going to be hitting almost $4.2 trillion now. So that's just some crazy move that's currently going on there. TTD, which is the stock that is in the Nasdaq 100, not part of the S&P, will be joining the S&P this Friday morning on open. Stock's up about 14%. It's most likely to open at $86. Anyways, make sure all of you guys subscribe. We will come back live in order for most likely a pre and post market if there's some fireworks. Otherwise, whenever you guys see me live, you'll get a notification. So make sure you subscribe. Let's also go ahead and see how the vote has ended up. And we can then put an end to the vote. And I should be able to get the vote right here. Can I not? Okay, so anyways, irrespective of that, you should be able to see the markets heading higher any moment. And I would say that this bull market is continuing as much as people don't want it to. Anyways, nice chatting with you guys. Let's chat either in a post market if shit goes crazy, or else we will be back tomorrow. If there's nothing tomorrow, then maybe day after. Let's see. Enjoy yourselves. Take care. Thank you.